Hi, and welcome to a mindful gardening session with me, Kendall Platt from Adventures with Flowers. Today's training is called Right Plant, Right Place, and it is going to show you how to make sure your plants are as happy as they can be in your garden. By following the tips I'm about to give you, you can ensure that not only will your plants stay alive, but that you get loads of flowers or veggies from them as well. And the happier your plants are, the less you'll have to tend to them, which is a win-win for a busy woman, in my opinion. So, what are we going to talk about? So, the topics I'm going to cover today are going to be looking at sun versus shade in your garden and how you can work that out. I'm also going to talk a little bit about soil types as well, and again, how you can work out what your soil type is, about soil pH, and how you can work that out, and also soil moisture retention and how you can work that out, and then how you use all of that information coupled with the plant labels that are on the plants in garden centres or online to choose the right plants for your garden. So let's go into the training. So the first thing is sun versus shade. So one of the primary things that plants need in order to thrive and produce loads of gorgeous blooms is the correct amount of sunlight, which probably doesn't surprise you if you studied GCSE biology. But a question I get asked a lot is, how do I work out what levels of sunlight I have in my garden? So I have devised a little method, I guess, or technique of how to do that. So the first thing I want you to do is sketch a basic plan of your garden. Doesn't need to be fancy, just literally squares and circles, and mark all of any of your borders or any areas that you want to grow plants in onto your sketch plan. And then on a sunny day, probably on a weekend, because you're going to need to be in for most of the day, starting at 8 in the morning, go out into the garden on the hour, every hour, and using your sketch plan, write an S on the sketch plan for each border that is in direct sun. You want to do this every hour until probably around 6 p.m. or until the sun goes down, depending on what time of year you're doing it. So yeah, so that's so every hour write an S on if there is direct sun. So what is direct sun? So direct sunlight is sunlight that shines onto a plant or the border at full strength, with nothing getting in between the sunlight and the border. So if the border has got a shadow over it from a tree, then it doesn't get an S, basically. So if I just go to my next slide, this is a sort of example one that I've done for you here. So you can see that there's a tree in the top right hand corner of the garden, and that tree is obviously shading the border directly below it. So that only has a couple of S's in it. There's a long thin border along the top edge of the seating area, which has got a few more S's, and then you have got the square border to the left of the seating area that has got lots of S's in it. So what you want to do is, once you've done this for your garden, you want to total up the total number of S's for each border and work out what sunlight levels you have got in each border using this grid, I guess. So if you have less than 3 S's, then you have got a shady area. So you need to make sure that when you go to the garden centre, you then pick plants that will do well in a shady area. If you plant a plant that likes the full sun in the shade, you'll just never get plants from it. And then if you've got 3 to 6 S's, then you have got partial sun, partial shade. So again, if a plant likes full sun and it doesn't get the full sun, you just won't get the most out of the plant, and it won't die, but it just won't produce as many flowers or veggies as you want it to. So just go careful when you're choosing your plants there. And then if you have got 6 or more S's, then you have got a fully sunny area, which is great for things like vegetables, or any annual flowers that you want to grow that need a lot of sun to help them grow quickly. Similarly, if you were to plant a plant that thrives in shade in a full sun border, you will end up with a very crispy, sad looking plant. So just bear that in mind when you choose your plants. So this activity is a great excuse to get outside into your garden. But what I love so much about doing it is that actually whilst you're doing it, it really makes you take notice of nature, and to be really present in that moment. So it's a great mindful activity and really good if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, and you just need to focus on something in nature and outside. So it's a really great activity for that. So next we are on to soil type. So there are 6 main soil types. I bet you never knew that there was that many. I know, it's quite mad, isn't it? I guess because we're so used to only seeing the soil that we're used to. But the first of the soils is clay soil. These are pretty heavy but very high in nutrients. In the winter they tend to be very wet and cold and quite hard to dig, because they're so heavy. And in the summer they dry out and they can dry literally as hard as rock. So again, still very hard to dig. So clay soils are quite tough, I'm not going to lie. And if they get really, really dry in the summer, then they can often crack as well. So you may have seen that in the last couple of summers we've had have been really, really hot. So if you've got clay soil, you may have noticed that cracking. Sandy soils then are very light and low in nutrients, so the complete opposite pretty much to clay. And they dry really well, because they are so well draining, and because of that they are often quite acidic soils. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but they would have a pH reading of below 7. Then we've got silt soils. So they are very fertile and they retain moisture well, but they are also still quite light. So the only thing with these is they can be quite easily compacted if a lot of weight is applied to them. So if you're standing on the soil to dig out something and you're putting a lot of weight onto it, it can really compact the soil and destroy the soil structure. So that's just something to be aware of if you've got a silty soil. And then you've got loams, which are kind of a middle of the road soil. So these take all the good bits from the clay, the sand and the silt. So a loamy soil is your ideal, really. If you're gardening on loam, then you're pretty lucky. Then we've got peat soils. So these are very, very fertile as they've got a lot of organic matter in them, and they also retain moisture really well. And then lastly, we've got chalky soils, which can be light or heavy, and they tend to have a pH higher than 7, which makes them alkaline ever so slightly. So I bet you're thinking, okay, this is great, but how do I work out what soil I'm working with? Well, that is good, because I'm going to tell you now. So this is a bit fun, and you might have to get your hands a bit mucky in order to do it, but it is quite nice to just kind of really connect with the soil and try and work out what you've got going on. You might have a soil that's a mixture of a few of these as well, so don't be surprised if it doesn't fall exactly into these categories, but it just gives you a bit of an idea as to what you need to do with your soil to help the plants grow really well. So clay soil, as you've probably gathered, is a bit like the clay you use for pottery. So it's quite sticky, it will smear really easily, and you can roll it into a sausage in your hands. Silty soils are, sandy soils next. You will not be able to roll sandy soil into a sausage, as you could probably imagine, but you will be able to feel the grains of sand as you rub your hands, rub it in your hands. So that's quite a good indication. Silt soils are pretty much never found in gardens. When they're dry, they're kind of like a floury consistency, as in like flour that you use to make bread with. And when it's wet, you can roll it into shapes in your hand. Not quite as well as the clay, but you can still make shapes out of it. But you're unlikely to have that in your garden. If you have, then then you're very rare. Loamy soils are a mixture of all of those types in varying quantities, like I said. So if your soil has got slightly more clay in it, it will be easier to form into shapes. And then if it's slightly on the sandier side, it will be less easy to form into shapes. Peat soil feels quite spongy in your hands, and they tend to be very dark coloured due to all the peat that they've got in there, and all the moisture they retain because of that. And then chalky soils are probably one of the easiest ones, is they often contain lumps of white chalk in them. So they're very easy to spot. So all soil types, regardless of what you have, benefit from being improved every year with compost. So usually at the start of the growing season, you would add some nice homemade garden compost, or some of the you can buy from the garden centres, or you can get deliveries done straight to you, depending on what you want to do. That's a really good option at the start of the growing season. If you would prefer to improve your soil at the end of the growing season, sort of autumn, winter time, then well-rotted horse manure is great. Chuck it on in the autumn, and then it will rot down over the winter, and it will give loads of really lovely nutrients ready for the spring. You don't want to put the horse manure on so much in the spring, because a lot of new plant growth is coming up, and the horse manure, if it's not that well rotted, it can sometimes burn some of the plants. So it's just go a little bit careful there. I could go on and on, as you probably guessed, about making compost and how to improve your soil. So I think I'll probably have to do that as another training. But if I go on to pH now, so as I've already said, the pH, the type of soil that you have can have a huge effect on the pH of the soil, and therefore in turn the type of plants that you can grow. So for example, you've probably noticed acid-loving plants like maybe rhododendrons or hydrangeas grow really well in your garden if you've got sandy soil. Or if you've ever bought a blueberry bush and you've looked on the label and it says use ericaceous compost, and you thought, what on earth does that mean? Basically, ericaceous compost is an acidic compost, and blueberries and hydrangeas love to grow in ericaceous acidic compost, so with a low pH number. So that's what ericaceous means, if you've seen that. So if you are on a chalky soil, then things like lily of the valley and the lovely fragranced lilac, if you are lucky enough to have a lilac, they absolutely love chalky soils because they are very alkaline. So that's a high pH number. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to work with nature, because that will ensure that our plants are the healthiest they can be, and ultimately more flowers. And also, you know, it's just easier for you as a gardener to work with nature rather than against, basically. You'll have more success that way. So how are we going to test your soil pH? There's a few ways. The first way, and the image you can see here, is a pH meter. These are relatively cheap, very easily available, and you can use them more than once. This one actually looks at the soil moisture levels as well. I got this one, I think, from Wilko. So they're probably not that accurate, but they give you a good enough indication. You can also get soil testing kits, which I think you can probably get from Amazon or any good garden centres. These are slightly more expensive. They are more accurate, but they obviously are single use, because you add the soil to a little tube and then you add some chemical on, and it will do a colour change basically to tell you what pH you've got. And then your last option, and the most expensive option, is to send your soil samples to a lab. So this is really great if you are maybe wanting to grow a lot of flowers from home, or grow flowers as a flower farmer, because you can also ask them to test for different soil nutrients as well as part of that test. But obviously it is the most expensive, and I would say if you are just wanting to grow a few flowers and veggies at home, this is probably a bit overkill. So unless you really want to, I probably wouldn't waste your money. I'd save it, buy a cheapy pH meter, and then buy more plants. But that's just me. So the next thing we're going to talk about then is soil moisture retention levels. So this is very heavily linked to your type of soil, probably understandably. So a poor draining soil, for example, would be a heavy clay soil. So the moisture level of the soil will be very high, especially if there's been a lot of rain. And the problems that this can cause is plants sort of left to sit in that water may rot, as their roots will struggle to find the air pockets in the soil that they need to have access to in order to grow, because those air pockets will all be filled with water. So this means then that if you have got heavy clay soil, you will have to improve your soil before planting your plants to add additional drainage in. So you might do this by adding some grit or some sand into the bottom of the planting hole that you've dug out to put your plant in. I would also probably suggest adding some garden compost in there as well, just to kind of give some good nutrients. And this just kind of means that the water can move away from your plant roots, or it will be kept away from the plant roots, because you'll have some kind of slightly chunkier materials in there. So it can feel a real struggle when you're trying to grow things like tulips on clay that love free draining soil, and if you don't give bulbs like a free draining underlayer, then they will very likely rot, and you'll be left wondering. You just won't get any, maybe not even any leaves, but probably not any flowers, and you'll just be left wondering why on earth that happened. So if you are on a heavy clay and you really want to grow bulbs, and I think everybody should, because they are just such a great addition to the kind of March, April garden, that you probably are best to grow them in pots with a nice kind of free draining compost. And that will make sure that you actually do get some lovely flowers. Then we're on to our freely draining soil. So as previously mentioned, this would be things like sandy soils. They're very free draining, and this means that the nutrients are quickly kind of leached out of them with the water. You can improve your planting hole with garden compost or some well rotted manure. And this will just mean that the roots will have plenty of nutritious soil around them that will help them not only to retain moisture, but also to get the plant off to a really good start. So you can also apply a layer of compost or manure to the soil surface around the plant at every growing season, and this will ensure that the soil, the nutrients that are being leached out, are replaced, and it will help with the water retention as well. And then lastly, the average draining, which I think I probably a relatively average draining soil where I am here. I've got lots of stones and a bit of a kind of loamy soil here. So loamy soils tend to be average draining. So as they're a mix of the clay, the sand and the silt, they are probably the easiest ones to grow in. So however, they will still need a little bit of TLC from you once a year to ensure that they keep producing lovely flowers and veggies for you if you want to grow veggies. So a top dressing of garden compost or well rotted manure in either spring or autumn, depending on what you're going to add, will ensure that your soil continues to have really good moisture retaining properties and good nutrient levels. So this will probably take you maybe half a day, depending on the size of your garden, to get it delivered, and then just spread it all around the garden if you can. Or if you've made all your garden compost yourself, then you can kind of do it over time. That's what I tend to do, because I've got a compost bin, but I can only produce so much compost at a time. So I just do it as and when through the season, just in rotation on my beds. So if we just go here, this is a really quick way to work out what your soil moisture retention levels are. So if you just dig a hole that's about 30 to 45 centimeters across and the same deep, Fill the hole to the top with water. So you can see in the lower picture there, I filled the hole to the top with water, and then just set a timer on your phone. Keep coming back and checking, and once the water has gone, obviously look at the time. If it's gone in about sort of 10 minutes or less, then you've got freely draining soil. If it takes more than an hour, you've got poorly draining soil, and then anything in between is kind of average draining, basically. So that's just a really quick and easy test that you can do to work that out. So here, feel free to make this slide for yourself, and you could have one for each area, border or area in your garden, and you can just circle which one they fall into. And then this is a really nice, easy little kind of cheat sheet, if you will, to take to the garden centre with you when you are choosing your plants. So you can fill in your sun, what sort of sun levels you've got, what sort of soil type you've got, which will likely be the same all around the garden. Your soil pH, that may or may not change depending on shade levels, and also your soil moisture retention as well. So like I said, you can fill that out, write it down, and take it with you to the garden centre. Generally, if you have got a garden that you want to do lots of different areas to, I would suggest probably just focusing on one border or area to start with, so you don't get overwhelmed. So get that looking, you know, really good, and then next season you can maybe focus on the next border, or later in the season if you want to move on that quickly. So, you know, just take it steady, don't get too overwhelmed and try and do everything all at once. I'm a bit guilty of that, but I try now to just kind of focus on one area, get it looking really great, build my confidence up, and then move on to the next area. I'm just going to show you here now. This is a little video which will help you hopefully to decipher plant labels, because they can be a little confusing. So I'm just going to click that now and be quiet.
Quick little video here on how to decipher plant labels, because as you can see from these, they are far ranging. I guess the most probably unhelpful and simplest ones are these that just have a symbol. So this probably tells you it will be happy in full sun or a bit of shade. Tells you to water it, helpful, and occasionally to give it a feed as well, and it also tells you the size that it will get to. But nothing on the type of soil or the pH of the soil. So this one here is nice and easy, sun part shade or shade, so that's good. Again, it says about the fact that it likes any soil that isn't waterlogged, but nothing on the pH there. This one likes full sun, and again that's telling you how big it will get to. And again, no waterlogging, but again, it doesn't tell you anything on the pH. And then these ones are probably the best, because it literally says it in black and white in writing, ideally in deep shade or partial shade with moist but well-drained soil. So again, nothing on the pH, but generally if it doesn't mention the pH, then it will probably be happy in a neutral soil. And then this one here, so it says full sun, and other than that, it doesn't really tell you much else about the soil, tells you what height it will get to. So yeah, it is a kind of bit of a guessing game sometimes, and there is an element of just planting it according to the information you do have and seeing where you go. But as most of us have probably a nearly neutral soil anyway, most of the plants should be fine, unless they particularly like, for example, like blueberries really like an ericaceous soil to grow in. So I hope that's been helpful, and good luck deciphering your plant labels. Quick little video here on how.
So that's everything from me today. I hope that has been useful and given you some little techniques that you can use to work out the best plants for your garden. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit now about some of the other ways that I can help you. So the first thing that I can offer is seasonal garden coaching. So This is a bespoke service for us to work together on your garden, so me and you. I've got a few different areas that levels that I can offer there. So I've got a garden SOS hour, which is an online session where I suggest plants that might be suitable for you to grow in line with your wants and needs. So if you're thinking, oh, I really want a nicely fragrant seating area, what plants should I grow? Then we can have a conversation. There is a little form to fill in. We can have a conversation. I can suggest the plant to you. So if you want a little bit more help, or perhaps you'd like to learn to look after the plants you've already got in your garden, or you like to create a relaxing area in which to unwind at the end of a long day. If so, then my 1 month seasonal garden coaching package is ideal for that. So you get my we have one session, I think, either in person or online, whatever suits you. And then you have you have contact with me for the whole month via WhatsApp or email, whatever's easiest for you, to ask me advice throughout the time that you're putting that together. And then my gardening through the seasons package is perfect if you've got a larger project that you'd like some more advice on over a 3-month period. So again, I think there's a few 2 or 3 sessions included in that, either online or in person, when I can actually come to your garden. Then you also get access to me via WhatsApp and email as well to for any sort of questions you have or advice you need. Then we've got my online workshops. So these allow you to learn a mindful gardening and floristry skill from the comfort of your own home or garden and at your own pace. So these are really great if you like to do e-learning, I guess. And then if you're more of a self-study fan and you're not so hot on the whole technology thing, then my Mind in Bloom subscription box will deliver you a monthly mindful gardening activity to your door. The box contains either plants, bulbs or seeds, and printed instructions on how to grow your flowers mindfully. The instructions will also point you towards mindful gardening and floristry videos on my YouTube channel. So if you do like watching videos to show you how to do things, then there is that option available to you as well. But I hope you have enjoyed today, and please do email me if you have any questions. My email is hello@adventureswithflowers.com. Thanks so much. Bye.